Esther chapter 1. I'm excited about next week. We're going to have our Super Bowl Sunday. And not only going to have a great time, we're definitely going to be dressed down, dressed into your favorite casual sporting gear. So if you happen to have the two NFL teams that are playing, only Oliver will have a Steelers outfit on, maybe a few others will. But you wear your favorite Gator stuff, you know what I mean? But it's going to be a great time. We're going to have a couple commercials. So each ministry is going to provide a commercial up here on stage.
Okay.
So looking forward to that. If the marrieds, if you want to get involved, marrieds or pros or campus, high school, middle school, if you want to be involved in your commercial, make sure you see your ministry leaders, because I'm sure they need people. I've had Mary come up and say they want to be involved at this time. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge, come talk, all right? We need some folks. I don't want me doing a commercial by myself. And we have, after the service, we're going to have Super Bowl parties. Okay, so make sure you set that up as well. Because the game starts like 30 minutes after church gets off. So it's like perfect. We'll just go home and turn on the game. It'll be awesome, all right? So today we're going to do our sermon series. This will be our fifth one of the series we've been doing on men and women of courage. Okay, so far we've talked about 4 different men so far. We've probably looked at the life of Daniel, of Gideon, of Luke, and of Caleb. And today we're going to get into a woman. Let's talk about Esther. The title is Esther, the courage to do what is right. Now there are 66 books in the Bible. Do you know how many are named after a person? Like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, for instance. Some books are like Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, named after cities. How many books are named after people? 39. How many of those 39 books named after people, how many are named after a woman? 2. We have Esther, what's the other one? Ooh. That's right. So what that means is this book is significant. This book is important. There's only 2 books in the Bible named after a sister. And this is one of them. We're going to study that out today. It's been really a lot of fun for me to study out the life of Esther. I'll be honest, I got to confess, I have never preached or taught a lesson on Esther. And for most of you in here, men, because women, you go to conferences and you hear classes on Esther or Ruth. But most men, since you don't sneak into the women's classes at conferences, I think, you may have never heard a lesson before on Esther. You probably maybe you've read Esther. Maybe you've never heard a sermon or a lesson on Esther. If you've been in this church and only listened to me, you wouldn't have ever heard. Maybe you've heard something different. But today we're going to get into that. Let me give you a little history on the book of Esther. The author is unknown. We don't know who wrote the book, but we do know that most of the story takes place in a single year. That one year is 470 BC. Okay, that's significant. 470 BC, and it's during the reign of King Xerxes. Xerxes ruled from 486 to 465 BC, and here you have Esther's book. It takes place in 470. It takes place in a Persian city called Susa. I'll give you a little more Old Testament history to kind of lead up to this. You know how Moses took the Israelites through the Red Sea and then Joshua from the desert right into the Promised Land, right? And the Israelites had lots of years of peace, but they also began to struggle spiritually. They began to leave God. And so God allows them to be surrounded by an enemy, the Babylonians at first. The Babylonians eventually take all of Israel into captivity. And in the year 586 BC, about 100 years before Esther, is when all the Israelites are either killed, except for a small remnant that gets to survive and go back into captivity, basically be slaves from Babylonians. Well, a whole new group takes over in the next 100 years. The Medo-Persian era begins, the whole new era of world dominance by, of course, the Medes and the Persians. They take over, and that's where we find the story of Esther. It's now 470 BC. Some of the Israelites have gone back into the Promised Land and began to rebuild, but a lot of the Israelites are still in the captive lands. They're still back where the Medes and the Persians are living, and they're still serving, not necessarily as slaves, but certainly as a second-rate citizen. And that's where you're going to find the story here, is where Esther is. She's in the city of Susa, and she's going to be going before the king there, and you'll see what happens. Interestingly enough, I thought about the impact this story has on the later books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Because, Nehemiah, it says in chapter 2 of Nehemiah that it was in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes that he goes back. So that's in 445 BC. So my question to you is, where is Nehemiah in 470 BC when this book of Esther is being written or being lived out? Where is Nehemiah? If in 445 he goes back to the Promised Land, where is he in 470? He's right here. He's either in Susa or in the surrounding provinces of Susa. Why is that important? Because if Ezra doesn't stand up and do what she does, you would never know who Nehemiah is. You would never know Ezra. Those stories wouldn't have happened if it's not for her. Fast forward even that, Jesus' ministry would be completely different because the Jews would have been wiped off. Now, I believe God would have still come up with another plan to save the Israelites had not Esther done what she does in this book. But I want you to grasp the significance of who Esther is historically. She's an amazing sister, an amazing woman of God who stands up and does something pretty profound. So let's get into this. Esther chapter 1. I have to give you a little history because I don't want to just jump right into a book and go, what is this all about? All right, Esther 1, we're going to start here in verse 10. It says, on the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, basically he's been throwing a party for quite a while, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abigtha. Not a lot of children name these today. Zephyr and Cardis. To bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come, and the king became furious and burned the name. Stop right there. Now, some of you, perhaps all of you, are going to be a little bit offended today at reading this story. Because you're going to be offended at the culture that's going on, the way that women are treated back in this day. Women were viewed as nothing more than objects of beauty. When they were summoned into the man's presence, they were to come. They were known for their beauty and for their serving. That was pretty much the only thing they contributed to society. So we'll be a little bit offended. But understand, this is not how women are viewed today in the United States. Amen? This scene here, Queen Vashti does the unthinkable. She refuses to come. King's like, what? You don't come when I call you? How dare you? I'm angry. And he realizes, you know what? If I do nothing, then all the women of the city of Susa are all going to begin to treat their husbands this way. That's what they thought. So we need to punish Queen Vashti and make an example out of her so that all the women in the city realize that when the man calls, you come. So they punish her. They basically say, you are no longer queen because of what you did. As a matter of fact, you can never come into the presence of the king ever again. So they begin this search for a new queen, based solely on one quality. That's the only thing they're going to look for in a new queen. Beauty. They're going to ask for everyone to bring the most beautiful women from around the land and walk them in front of the king. If you've heard of American Idol, this is now Persian Idol. Okay? So there's no singing involved. It's just how you look. Let's read about what happens. Esther chapter 2, in verse 1. It says, later when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, what he had decreed about her. And the king's personal attendant proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the city of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. Stop right there for a second. What this does is set up the relationship. Mordecai is basically the man who raises Esther. But he's not a father. He's basically her older cousin. Okay, so when the mom and dad dies, he takes Esther and says, I'll raise you. He's a very spiritual man, raises Esther to be a spiritual woman. Verse 8. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids, selected from the king's palace, and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background, because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now listen to this part. Before a girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. What do you think about that? Can you imagine being a woman in this day and age? And someone walks around and says, you know what, you're pretty enough to be considered for this game that we're playing today, called American Idol. I mean, it's going to be Susa Idol here that we're doing, Persian Idol. So why don't we select you and put you in with the 1,000 other women who are being selected? And now what we're going to do is for the next 12 months, we're going to give you 6 months worth of oil treatments to make sure that your skin is just so beautiful. And then we're going to do just all over. Get it just right. Maybe tan you up a little, listen in. I mean, just, I don't know if they have little workout machines or what, but everyone's getting ready. Could you imagine the build-up as a woman for that 12 months, for that one moment that you walk in front of this king that you don't know? It's a bit degrading. Yes. Sexist, what's going on here. This is what the times were like back then, to be a woman. And this is where Esther is. Now I want you to also notice that Esther does not reveal that she's a Jew. Okay? That's not been told. Mordecai said, don't tell them. We're second-rate citizens here. You know, don't tell them you're a Jew. Just go and be a part of it. So she's up there. God's allowing this to happen. Now we're going to skip ahead to Esther chapter 3. I got to sort of tell the story along the way before we get into some other parts of my sermon today.